Hello and welcome to the video for section 2 of chapter 2. So in this section we're going to look at in detail at this concept called opportunity cost and how it relates to trade-offs, and we'll talk about what trade-offs are and how these concepts relate to the fact that we as human beings have to make choices in the face of scarcity. Right, so if you don't recall what scarcity is, we just talked about it in the last video lecture and the previous one for section 1 of chapter 2. So if you need to go back and review that, but scarcity makes us make choices, and choices involve opportunity costs. So let's start off this section by talking about what opportunity cost means. So this is another very basic concept in economics. It's very foundational. It's basically embedded in every single economic problem that we will talk about throughout the course of this term. But kind of like it sounds, the opportunity cost is the thing that you have, that you place the most value on, that you give up when you make a choice, right? So usually when I'm in class teaching this course and I talk about opportunity cost, I ask students, what would you be doing right now if you weren't in class? So I guess I could ask you, what would you be doing right now if you weren't watching this video? Whatever that thing is basically your opportunity cost of watching this video, right? It's the most valuable thing that you're giving up in order to watch this video. Which is a choice you've made. You've chosen to watch this video. You had to give up something. In fact, you gave up the opportunity to do a lot of things. But whichever thing you would be doing if you weren't actively engaged in the choice that you made, that's your opportunity cost. It's the highest valued, next best alternative that you have to sacrifice in order to do something or get something that you want. Now, there are lots of things you could be doing with your time other than watching this video. They are not all opportunity costs. Only the one that you place the highest value on is the opportunity cost, and that's why I say it's the thing that you would be doing, right? Because presumably, if you weren't watching this video, you'd be doing the next highest valued activity, whatever that would be. Maybe it'd be sleeping, maybe it'd be hanging out with friends. Although in this coronavirus environment, that may not be a good idea to hang out with too many friends, but in any case, maybe be playing a video game or something. Whatever you would be doing if you weren't watching this video, that is your opportunity cost. Okay, so that's the idea of opportunity cost. In fact, why don't we make this the discussion forum topic for this chapter? Go ahead and post what you would be doing if you were not watching this lecture video. What is your opportunity cost of watching this video, in other words? All right, so here's some questions. I pretty much already asked the first one there. What is the opportunity cost of attending this class? You could think of some other questions involving opportunity cost. What would be the opportunity cost of attending a concert put on by your favorite band? What is the opportunity cost of working out at the gym? Now, the interesting thing to note here is that this is going to depend on each person, right? Each individual person is going to have a different answer because each individual person has something different that is most valuable to them. So hopefully we'll see some different, we'll almost certainly see some different answer choices in the discussion forum when you post what your opportunity cost of attending this class is. So for us in economics, cost is always a foregone or given up opportunity, and thus opportunity cost, okay? So in every choice and every decision, there is something that we have to give up. And that includes not just individuals, but businesses, governments, any type of decision-making agent. Okay, so that's true for all types of economic agents. All right, so let's think about this in terms within the context of a real-life policy example. This is great. So the IRS has a free tax filing service quote unquote free. So you may have heard the phrase before, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and this is basically getting at the root of that, right? Um, so every year, more than 100 million taxpayers are eligible for the IRS's free file service, but fewer than 3 million people actually use that service, which implies that roughly 97 million taxpayers have an opportunity cost that is too high to use the service, and so they find alternative ways to allocate their time, right? So there you go. Yes, it might be free, but you basically have to give up your time to utilize the free service, and if your time is more valuable than the free filing, you might pay someone, say at H&R Block, to file your taxes because your time is more valuable to you than using it to use the free filing service, right? So there you go, right? Quote unquote free. Well, it's not really free. You're still giving up your time, right? So nothing in life is free. All right, so anytime you or anybody, any economic agent engages in an activity using any resource, whether it be time or energy or money or capital goods or land resources or otherwise, you're essentially making a trade-off of the use of that resource against one or more alternative uses, right? So time is probably the easiest one to think about. There are lots of different things you could do with your time. When you choose one particular thing to do with your time, you're giving up the opportunity to do those other things, and the value of the trade-off is represented by the opportunity cost, right? The most valuable thing that you could be doing with your time that you give up. One way to think about this is that if you made a list of the things you wanted to do with your next day, perhaps, and you put it in order from highest value to lowest value, you would do the first thing on your list. And the second thing on your list would be, the second highest valued thing on your list would be your opportunity cost. Okay, so hopefully that helps you think about what opportunity cost is. Now we're almost to a point where we can look at our first model, and our first model incorporates all of these aspects that we've learned so far here in Chapter 2. But basically, our first model is a graphical analysis of opportunity cost, and the model is called the production possibilities curve. It's also sometimes referred to as the production possibilities frontier. So you might see it abbreviated either as PPC or PPF. But this model is basically a representation of all the different possible combinations of maximum production or maximum output that could be achieved, assuming a fixed amount of productive resources of a given quality. Okay, we'll talk about this more in a second. So if you're a little confused, don't worry. We're going to talk about this in great detail. So here is a first example of a PPC or a PPF, and this would be a PPC for an individual, maybe yourself here. And so again, let's take this step by step and make sure we understand what this graph is telling us. Like I said earlier in the Appendix A video, I always like to make sure I understand what are on the axes. So on the x-axis is the expected grade in economics, and on the y-axis is the expected grade in mathematics. And we have a downward sloping curve here. And what this curve is illustrating is that there's a trade-off between the grade in economics and the grade in mathematics, right? So now I think this is a typo here. This should say 6 hours study time per week, not 12. 6 hours study time per week. Now you could spend all of your time studying math, in which case you could get an A in mathematics, which is the y-intercept there. But if you spent all your time studying mathematics, you would have no time left over to study economics, and so you would fail. You would expect to fail economics, your economics course. Now you could allocate some additional time to econ so that you don't fail. So maybe you spend 4 hours studying math and 2 hours studying economics. Well, that would improve your economics grade from an F to a D, but it would be at the cost of reducing your mathematics grade, going from an A to a B in math. And we can see that trade-off, and it's basically illustrated in the downward sloping line here, right? The higher grade we want in economics, the lower the grade we're gonna achieve in mathematics. And that's assuming, of course, that our limited resource is 6 hours of study time per week, okay? So that's the nature of a PPC. So this would be for an individual person. We can also have PPCs for entire economies, so we'll see that in a second. But in any case, what this model is doing, this PPC model, is it's illustrating trade-offs. It's also, in fact, illustrating opportunity cost. But with regard to this grade example, what could you possibly do, for example, if you wanted a higher grade in economics than in math? Well, of course, you could spend more time studying economics, but as we saw, the more time you spend studying economics, the less time you have to study math, and therefore, although you will be increasing your grade in economics, you would be trading that off against a decrease in your grade for mathematics. Okay. Now, of course, we're holding something constant here. So here's our first ceteris paribus assumption. We're holding constant study time. We're not allowing that to change. But if we allowed ourselves more study time per week, rather than 6 hours per week, we went with, say, 8 or 10 hours per week, what would that look like, right? Well, we'll talk about what that would look like in a second. Maybe you have a good guess. So think about that for a second. We'll talk about it in the later section, but try to think of what would happen in our model here if you spent more time studying. What would happen? What would change in this picture? All right, and then the other thing to note here is that this PPC is a straight line. So think about that. Right, what does that mean in terms of the trade-off? Well, it basically means that the trade-off is a constant trade-off. The trade-off isn't changing, right? If you give up a letter grade in math, you get a letter grade in economics, and that's true regardless of where you start, right? So if you start at having an A in math and an F in economics, and you want to improve your grade in economics to a D, you're giving up one letter grade in math, and that's true at that point A there. It's also true at, it's true at when you spend all 6 hours on math. It's also true, the trade-off is the same if you spend 2 hours on math and 4 hours on economics, for example, right? It's a letter grade for a letter grade. The trade-off is constant, so that's why it's a straight line. But we'll talk about that more in a second. All right. And we're going to wrap up this section with a behavioral economics example. And this is pretty interesting. It has to do with people's decision to be monogamous. So social scientists have found that the most common number of intimate partners that people report is one person. So in other words, monogamy. Now, an explanation for this is that people might feel that the opportunity cost of having more than one intimate partner is just too high. Got to give up too much time, too much money, too many other resources to have more than one partner, and so it's not worthwhile having more than one intimate partner, right? So here's a really interesting real-life behavioral economics example, right? So there you go. This concludes section 2 of chapter 2. I will see you in the next video for section 3.